The day Amina collapsed at the small market, the world went silent. People rushed around, shouting for help, but the man she loved didn't even turn his head. He tossed a few bills on the counter, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience, and walked away. That moment broke something inside her, but it also planted a seed. For months, Amina lay in a hospital bed, weak and forgotten, watching raindrops slide down the window like tiny reminders of time passing. Every night she whispered to herself, "I will walk again." Her legs trembled, her body ached, but her will grew stronger than her pain. Nurses told her to rest, doctors told her it would take time, but she pushed harder. The first day she stood without her crutch, she cried, not because she hurt, but because she had done what he said she never would. Her laughter filled the empty hospital room, soft but powerful. She promised herself that the next time she walked, it wouldn't be out of struggle, it would be out of victory. Years later, that promise came true. When she walked across a stage to receive her diploma, the crowd cheered so loud she almost couldn't hear her own heartbeat. She didn't look back at the man who once left her. She didn't need to. Every step she took was a reminder that strength doesn't come from those who stay, it's built from surviving those who leave. He told her, "You're a burden," when she needed him most. The words cut through her like glass. She had already lost so much, her health, her strength, her peace, and now the man she loved made her feel like she was too heavy to love. That night she cried until her body shook. Every breath hurt more than her illness. But when the tears stopped, something inside her changed. The pain didn't disappear, it hardened into determination. If she was going to be a burden, then she decided she'd be one he could never forget. The days that followed were slow and lonely. The house felt too quiet. Her phone stopped ringing. Friends drifted away, unsure of what to say. Loneliness became her only company, but she started to learn from it. It taught her how to sit with silence, how to depend on herself, how to rebuild her strength without anyone's hand to hold. She studied through her pain, her books stained with tears and coffee. There were nights she could barely lift her head from the pillow, but she still turned the page, whispering to herself, "Just one more chapter." Years passed. Her body healed, her spirit grew stronger, and her dreams, once dim, started to shine again. When graduation day came, the world finally saw what she had been building in the dark. As she walked across that stage in her cap and gown, the audience erupted in applause. People stood, clapping endlessly, their cheers echoing like thunder. Her name was called, and in that moment, every sleepless night, every cruel word, every tear suddenly made sense. She had made it, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. As she turned to face the crowd, she saw him. Standing in the back, his face pale, his eyes wide. The man who once told her she was a burden now watched her shine in a place he never believed she'd reach. For a moment their eyes met. She didn't feel anger and she didn't feel hate. She felt peace. Then she smiled, a calm, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of revenge, but of victory. She had carried herself when no one else would. She had turned heartbreak into strength, weakness into wisdom. And as the applause filled the hall, she finally understood. Sometimes, the people who break you are the same ones who build your courage without even meaning to. She was frail, forgotten, and unwanted. Her world had fallen apart in silence. Friends who once laughed with her slowly disappeared. Messages stopped coming. Visits ended. Even her own family spoke to her in soft, pitying tones, as if she were already gone. And the man she loved, the one who once promised forever, left before her pillow had even dried from the last tear. His side of the bed grew cold, and so did her heart. Some nights she wondered if she'd ever feel whole again. The walls of her room seemed to whisper her fears back at her. But every morning, even with swollen eyes and trembling hands, she whispered to herself, "Not yet." Those two words became her prayer, her promise, her fight. Not yet meant she wasn't done. It meant there was still something inside her worth saving. Slowly, she began again. The first time she tried to walk, she fell. The second time, she almost gave up. But she pushed herself up, one painful breath at a time. She learned to cook again, even when her hands shook. She learned to smile again, even when her heart still ached. Her world was small, but her spirit was growing. The woman who had once been broken was learning how to live again. Days turned into months and months into years. What started as survival turned into purpose. She began volunteering, helping others who felt forgotten like she once did. Her kindness became her strength, her pain became her story. People started to notice her, not for her beauty or her past, but for her courage. She never shouted her success. She simply lived it. Years later, when she stepped onto the grand stage to receive her humanitarian award, the audience rose to their feet. The lights were bright and her heart beat fast. As her name echoed through the hall, she looked out at the crowd, faces full of admiration, some with tears in their eyes. Her story, once filled with loss and loneliness, now made others believe again. She took the microphone, her hands steady, and smiled softly. "Strength," she said, "is not about never falling. It's about rising again and again, even when no one is watching." The room went silent. Then came the applause, loud, endless, full of love. That night, as she stood under the lights, she finally understood. Grace isn't given, it's earned through pain, patience, and faith in tomorrow. When he left, Amina had nothing but silence. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt like an empty shell. Every room reminded her of him, the coffee cup he left behind, the scent of his cologne fading from the pillow. Her body was weak from illness, but her heart hurt even more. Days blurred together. She woke up, cried, tried to eat, and cried again. Sometimes she stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering if this was all her life would ever be: pain, silence, and memories of someone who didn't stay. But life, cruel as it was, didn't break her, it built her. One night, after hours of crying, something inside her shifted. She looked at herself in the mirror, eyes swollen, face pale, and whispered, "Enough." That single word changed everything. She decided that if no one was going to save her, she would save herself. She started small, reading, writing, learning again. It wasn't easy. Her body shook with fever, her hands trembled when she held a pen, but she refused to give up. She studied late into the night, her books scattered across the bed, her determination burning brighter than her pain. Each morning, she woke up a little stronger. Her body still hurt, but her spirit grew tougher. She stopped waiting for someone to come back. She stopped replaying what went wrong. Instead, she focused on what could still go right. When she failed an exam, she tried again. When she felt too tired to move, she reminded herself why she started. She wanted a life that was hers, not one built around someone else's absence. Years passed. The weak, broken girl who once cried in silence became a woman of strength and purpose. The day finally came when she walked across the graduation stage. The crowd was huge, the lights were bright, and as her name was called, she took a deep breath. Her cap and gown felt heavy, but her heart felt light. The applause erupted like thunder, shaking the hall. People stood, clapping and cheering for the girl who refused to quit. As she walked across the stage, she thought of all the nights she almost gave up, all the tears, the pain, the loneliness. And in that moment, she realized she wasn't just walking. She was soaring. She had turned every heartbreak into power, every scar into strength. She didn't just survive, she became unstoppable. He never believed she'd make it. "You'll never be more than a sick woman," he sneered, his voice cold and sharp. Those words burned inside her for years. She lay in that hospital bed, tubes attached to her arms, staring at the ceiling, replaying his voice over and over again. Some nights she almost believed him. Her body was weak, her future uncertain, and her heart felt like it had been ripped apart. But one morning, as sunlight slipped through the blinds, she made herself a promise. She would not let his words be the story of her life. If he thought she couldn't do it, she would show him she could. At first, even sitting up was a battle. Her hands trembled when she held her phone, but slowly she began to work. From that same hospital bed where she once cried, she opened her laptop and started learning, watching videos, reading articles, teaching herself how to start a business. Her pain became her teacher, her hunger her guide. Between treatments, she sent emails to potential clients. When doctors came in to check on her, she smiled through the fatigue, her mind already planning her next step. The day she landed her first client, she laughed softly, tears running down her cheeks. It wasn't just a small business win. It was her first victory against everything that had tried to destroy her. Months turned into years. Her health improved slowly, but her business grew fast. What began with a single idea became a full company. Her name started appearing in articles. People admired her story, her strength, her courage to build an empire from a hospital bed. She became an inspiration to women everywhere, proof that pain could be turned into power. Then came the night she never imagined. Dressed in a glittering gown, she walked across the stage to receive the Entrepreneur of the Year award. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and applause filled the hall. As she held the trophy, her eyes scanned the crowd, and there he was. The man who once told her she'd never make it, standing in the back, tears in his eyes. She didn't hate him anymore. She didn't even need his apology. His regret was enough. She smiled softly, lifting the trophy high not for him but for herself. She had done it. She had built her empire from pain. And in that moment she realized, sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. The world forgot her the moment she got sick. People who once called her every day slowly stopped answering her messages. Friends promised to visit but never showed up. Even family members began to treat her like she was already gone, speaking in soft, sad tones as if she couldn't hear them. And the man she loved, the one who once swore he'd never leave, packed his bags one morning and walked out without looking back. She lay in her hospital bed, watching the door close, realizing that sometimes love disappears faster than hope. The silence that followed was louder than any pain she had ever felt. But she didn't let that silence destroy her. She turned it into her teacher. Every face that turned away reminded her to depend on herself. Every rejection built her resilience. Every lonely night gave her time to dream again. She stopped waiting for someone to save her. Instead, she decided to rebuild herself piece by piece. When her body was weak, she trained her mind. When her mind grew tired, she reminded herself that this pain had a purpose. Slowly she learned to stand again, not just on her feet but in her own worth. She began studying, even when her hands trembled. She spent long nights reading, writing, pushing through exhaustion. The girl who once cried quietly into her pillow was becoming someone unbreakable. Her journey was slow, full of setbacks and doubt, but she never gave up. She promised herself that one day she would make every person who abandoned her remember the strength they underestimated. Years later, that promise came true. When she walked across the stage in her graduation gown, the audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, celebrating the woman who refused to stay broken. Her heart pounded as she took the microphone. For a moment, she stood in silence, tears gathering in her eyes. Then, with a trembling smile, she said, "To the man who left me when I was dying, thank you. You taught me how to live." The crowd went quiet, stunned. Then the applause returned, louder, endless. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't from pain. It was freedom, pure, deep freedom. That night, as she held her degree close, she finally understood something powerful. Sometimes, the people who abandon you aren't your downfall. They're the reason you rise higher. And she had risen higher than anyone ever believed she could. Once she lay on a cold hospital floor, too weak to move, too tired to hope. The room smelled of medicine and loneliness. The morning light slipped through the blinds, but she couldn't even lift her head to see it. Just hours earlier, the man she had trusted with her whole heart had packed his bags and left without a word. No goodbye, no glance back, just the sound of the door closing behind him. That sound echoed in her mind, louder than any heartbreak she had ever felt. She wanted to scream, to cry, to beg him to stay, but her body wouldn't let her. She was left with nothing but silence, thick, heavy silence. Days passed. Nurses came and went, faces changing, voices fading. But the silence stayed. It became her companion, her mirror, her reminder that no one was coming to save her. She cried until there were no tears left, until her heart turned numb. But one night, as she stared at the ceiling, something inside her whispered, "Get up." It was quiet at first, but it grew louder, stronger. "Get up." And she did. Slowly, painfully, she pulled herself off that cold floor. Her legs shook, her arms trembled, but she stood. For the first time in a long time, she felt something, determination. From that moment, everything began to change. She started walking again, then studying, then working. She poured her pain into purpose. The silence that once haunted her became her motivation. Every lonely night reminded her why she had to keep going. She learned to smile again, not because life was easy, but because she refused to let it break her. Years later, that same silence filled a grand auditorium. The lights shone bright as she walked onto the stage, elegant and radiant. She looked nothing like the woman who once lay broken on a hospital floor. Her steps were strong, her head high, her smile calm. The audience rose to their feet, their applause echoing like thunder. Cameras flashed, people cheered her name, but she stood still for a moment, just listening. The roar of the crowd was loud, but beneath it, she heard something deeper, the memory of that silence that once surrounded her. And in that sound, she felt something sweeter than love, vindication. She had risen, not to prove him wrong, but to prove to herself that she was never too weak to begin again. He walked out under the bright morning sun, his footsteps fading while she sat by the window, too weak to call after him. The light outside was warm, but inside her world had gone dark. He didn't even glance back. She watched him disappear down the street, leaving her drowning in silence and shadows. For days, she didn't eat. For weeks, she barely spoke. The sickness had already taken her strength, but his leaving almost took her will to live. Still, somewhere deep inside, a small flame refused to die. She whispered to herself, "One day I'll rise." Time passed, slow and cruel at first. Her body healed little by little, but her heart took longer. She learned to stand again, then to walk, then to dream. The pain that once broke her became her reason to fight. She started studying, working, rebuilding. There were nights she cried quietly, but even through the tears, she kept moving forward. Life tested her again and again, but this time she didn't bend. She had already survived the worst, being left behind when she needed love the most. Years later, that same woman stood under bright lights in a glittering gown. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, people cheered as she walked the stage to receive her award. Her smile was calm, her eyes shining with quiet pride. As she looked up at the lights, she whispered softly, "I made it." The sickness that once weakened her had built her strength. The heartbreak that once crushed her had become her motivation. Somewhere out there, the man who left her might still remember her, but she no longer remembered the pain. He was nothing but a forgotten echo in her victory, and she had finally found peace.